What if we don't follow the money? Seen through Western eyes, the dark art of world domination can be shrouded in ideology, but must never be bad for business. Does Russia's president follow that logic? The Kremlin warned on that Monday's targeting of major urban centers was only a first step. We've seen more coming. What response from G7 nations to a Vladimir Putin ready to cut off his own revenue streams when he targets energy infrastructure, after all? When the war began, who thought Moscow would be accused of blowing up its own natural gas pipelines in the Baltic Sea, or playing atomic roulette with the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant? What's the Kremlin's calculation? What signal does it send when Putin promotes as his top military commander in Ukraine the same general who carpet-bombed Syria? Sergei Surokovin, dubbed the butcher by admiring Russian nationalists. More broadly, is the West any better at reading Russia than during the previous 22 years that Vladimir Putin has been in power? Today in the France 24 debate, we're wondering whether it's victory at any price for Moscow. And joining us from Brussels, Hannah Shelest, Director of Security Programs for the Foreign Policy Council Ukraine Prism. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for the invitation.
We're also joined by Raphaël Bourumont, Professor of Economics at the Paris School of Business. And this semester you're teaching?
I'm teaching energy economics. Good evening.
Good evening. Energy economics. Much to say on that. He brings his decades of experience in the oil and gas industry to this table. Jean-Louis Chilansky, former president of France's National Oil Industry Association, UFIP. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
And from Vilnius, we're joined by political analyst Alexandra Filipenko. How are you?
Hi, hello, thank you for having me.
The France 24 debate, where you can join the conversation on Facebook and Twitter. You have hashtag F24debate. Yes, sirens going off for a second day across Ukraine. 30% of the western city of Lviv without power. There were outages elsewhere. More Russian strikes, more threats. Kathy Clifford has more of the story.
For a second day straight, Ukrainians woke up to the sound of sirens and shelling as new missile strikes hit the southeastern town of Zaporizhzhia on Tuesday morning.
There were 2 explosions, then the third one. It was loud, things were flying over here. I rushed to the hallway, children were crying, my grandchild was crying.
Meanwhile, authorities said serious damage had been inflicted on central Ukraine energy facilities. Part of the western city of Lviv was left without power following Tuesday's strikes. Russia's defense ministry confirmed the attacks, which also hit the eastern cities of Sloviansk and Dnipro.
The armed forces of the Russian Federation today continued a massive air and sea strike with long-range precision weapons against Ukrainian military control and energy system facilities.
This after Moscow rained down more than 80 missiles on cities across Ukraine, including the capital, on Monday. The UN Human Rights Office expressed concern Russian strikes targeted critical civilian infrastructure and may have violated the laws of war.
We have to stress that intentionally directing attacks against civilians and civilian objects, that is, objects which are not military objectives, amount to a war crime.
The barrage from Moscow came in apparent retaliation for an explosion on a key bridge linking Russia to the annexed Crimean Peninsula. Russian President Vladimir Putin blamed Ukraine and warned of severe responses to any further attacks.
Hannah Shelest, the Russians on Monday at times ridiculed for missing targets. Nonetheless, we're seeing power outages across Ukraine. Your thoughts on this after this second day of this campaign?
You know, that is definitely the acts of terror, because if we remember the basic definition of the terrorism, it is using the fear for the political goals. And even that the Russian Federation announced that they targeted some kind of the military goals. So you can speak about this when they targeted fuel refineries, for example, because fuel being used for the military equipment. But what they targeted yesterday and today, it is electrical stations and heating stations. And we're in the mid of October. So for the northern part of Ukraine, heating already is very important stuff. So we perfectly understand that leaving Ukraine without light, without warmth, and targeting just the downtown of Kyiv, first of all, had not the military goals, but to bring fear and panic for the population that just started to use to the regular, let's say, style of the Russian attacks just for the residential areas. Now there, and also this in mass targeting, that was very demonstrative from the Russian side, because previously we had few drones, few missiles, 1, 2, 3, so that's something the air defense can work. When you had 83 within 1 hour, plus 20 kamikaze drones, that definitely was the classical style of the new commander of the Russian forces in charge of Ukrainian dimension.
All right, so the signature of the new commander, you say, and then you have these sort of contrasting images. On the one hand, 3 districts across from the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant that have been targeted by Moscow, and on the other, Vladimir Putin sitting down in St. Petersburg with the head of the International Atomic Energy Agency. Again, your thoughts on this contrast that we're seeing, what with Putin saying he's concerned about the fighting around Zaporizhzhia?
You know, the fighting around Zaporizhzhia were because of the Russian Federation. We started to pay attention to what is happening there. I mean, we, together with the international community, this summer, but de facto it's been occupied since spring. And when Russians positioned there the military equipment just inside of the engine hall, and that was confirmed by the Atomic Agency delegation that visited just a few weeks ago the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant, that is already violation of the nuclear safety and security measures that was emphasized all the time. But we lost a little bit time for these 3 months. Now it's definitely when the fighting intensified there, the international community and Atomic Agency started to pay more attention. Ukraine already proposed to make a demilitarized zone back in June, but the Russian Federation rejecting it. And that is also can be considered as the war crime because they're jeopardizing with the nuclear threat, not nuclear weapons, but nuclear threat, the population around. And don't forget that that is happening not around Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant. When they're shelling the Mykolaiv region regularly and very intensively the last months, they are very close to another nuclear plant, the Yuzhno-Ukrainsky nuclear plant. And yesterday, they were very close to the Khmelnytsky nuclear plant. So Ukraine has not only Zaporizhzhia, and Russians, unfortunately, are targeting goals and aims very close to other nuclear plants as well.
Raphaël Borumont, we've talked a little bit less in the last week about this nuclear threat, but it's still there.
Yeah, I mean, I can talk about the economic aspect of the crisis. Actually, we have to understand that Europe has to get out of this geopolitical credulity because we are facing an economy of war because President Putin is using energy globally, let's say oil and gas, as a weapon, as an economic weapon to weaken European economies, European industries. So it's time for Europe to have a collective strategy to be able to face this blackmail and this situation of blackmail about energy supply. If President Putin is willing to stay until 2036, it means that Europe has to prepare to live without Russian oil and gas.
It sounds like it's going beyond just energy security. After Monday's strikes, we heard the French President Emmanuel Macron, who's always pleaded for keeping the lines of communication open with Moscow, taking stock of the escalation.
France, of course, as I had the opportunity to do this morning, has condemned in the strongest terms Russia's deliberate strikes on the whole of Ukrainian territory and against civilians, which is a profound change in the nature of this war.
All right, so the feeling that it's a new phase, and we've had, in the last hours, Germany delivering for the first time this air defense shield system, the first of several, and the United States pledging it's going to do the same. Is it just Ukraine that's in a wartime economy now, or are we all in it?
In the beginning of the war, in the 24th of February, we said that it's an economic war. So Europe has to prepare its economy to this dimension of war, because if each country continue to have its own strategy, like Germany did before by getting out of nuclear without any coordination with other European countries, we will lose. So it's very important to have this collective strategy and coordination
But do
approach.
you have the feeling, Raphael, that since Monday, it's escalated to a new level? We just heard the French president, and now Europe is going further in.
Yeah, definitely you are right. But since I'm not a military expert, I cannot confirm that. But it seems that before and after Monday, something has changed that is very important. So we are in a new phase of this crisis, this geopolitical emergency.
All right, so we talked about parallel universes when it comes to the shelling near Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant and the images of the UN's nuclear watchdog in St. Petersburg. Also far from the front, Vladimir Putin this Tuesday meeting in St. Petersburg with Emirates leader Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed. This after praising the OPEC Plus oil producers club, they're both members, for the production cuts last week, which they say successfully countered, quote, the mayhem, those are the words of the Russian president, sown by the United States.
Our actions are aimed at creating stability in the global energy markets.
Stability in the global energy markets, Jean-Louis Chilansky.
This is almost funny. I mean, if there is one person who is disrupting the global energy market, it's the president of the Russian Federation. I mean, he has cut the gas supplies to Europe. He has cut some of the oil supplies to Europe. It's heavily disrupting. And on top of that, he has agreed with OPEC to cut the global production of OPEC by 2 million barrels a day.
Why are they agreeing to this at this time with this escalation?
Price, sir, price. They want to keep the price of oil high. And in fact, they succeeded in a way. Oil prices went down to $85 a barrel.
It's back under $90 a barrel.
Exactly, and now we are well above $90 a barrel.
It's going a little bit back down.
A little bit back down, but it went up to almost $100 a barrel. And they took some preventive measures, that's what they are saying, to make sure that the price of oil would be kept high. And in fact, in a way, they succeeded.
Jean-Louis, you remember at the beginning of the war, there was Imran Khan, who happened to be on a visit to Moscow, the Pakistani prime minister. It was an unfortunate photo op for him to be seen with Vladimir Putin just as he's invading a sovereign state. What are your thoughts when you see MBZ, the Emirati leader, traveling to St. Petersburg?
Well, they have joint interest. It is as simple as that. I think they want to keep their revenue. And in fact, which is sad in a way, the OPEC key members are objective allies with Russia in their attempt to keep the oil prices high. And that's very difficult to take, but I think that's reality.
All right, the price is high, but the volumes are starting to go down. Despite a discount on Russian oil, seaborne crude exports fell to a 12-month low in volume. This as Moscow's EU customers make the quick switch, and we've seen an impressively quick switch to liquefied natural gas imports away from pipelines. Moscow's gas exports to Europe falling to their lowest levels in 4 decades. Alexandra Filipenko, it was the point we talked about at the outset of this conversation. Why is Vladimir Putin doing this? This is not good for his business.
It is not good for his business, but talking about the stability, of course, we cannot even mention political stability in Russia. That's the only thing he cares about. But probably talking about this stability, it's rather talking about the new world order. It seems that everything points to the fact that Vladimir Putin thinks that he can establish this new world order and a new world energetic order, let's say, if we can put it this way. economy. So this, of course, Kremlin is only interested in the stability and its power. They do not want anyone or anything close to them that can somehow be dangerous for leaders of the Kremlin inside Russia. That is why all opposition leaders are either killed or in jail, or they fled the country. With all these actions, it seems that he's just grasping more power within Russia. And he's showing Russians that he is the leader of this new world order. That's how it's, at least that is how it's seen from Moscow.
And that was the calculus back on February the 24th?
Well, probably they expected that they could really get Kiev for 3 days. Probably they thought that they were powerful enough and that Europe would not help Ukraine that much. But thankfully, Europe and the United States are helping Ukraine, and Kremlin absolutely didn't expect that to happen. And but now they are trying to play the cards that they have on their hands, and now they are trying to turn it around and show Russian people it's not a coincidence that President Putin is all the time, he's saying everything's going according to the plan, but no one knows the plan. But it seems as if, at least he says, that everything's going according to the secret plan, some amazing great plan that they have, and nothing seems to be going according to the plan.
Alexandra, this is all predictable. I mean, Vladimir Putin, yeah, sure, he may be a little more isolated than past Russian or Soviet leaders, but he knows all of this. He knows what the consequences are when he escalates further, and yet he's doubling down. It's so hard to understand why.
He is in the domestic policy. You could see that all the time he was escalating. Every time he was raising stakes. That was his thing in Russia. And I suppose that he really did not expect this unity of Europe, and he thought that the United States were polarized enough. After the Trump administration, they were polarized enough not to get enough votes in Congress to help Ukraine or to start a land lease, et cetera, et cetera. And he probably thought that France would never come together with the whole Europe, and Germany and UK would not join in to help Ukraine. I am sure that they did not expect that in the Kremlin. It's a deep question why they didn't know and why they didn't realize. And most probably because they didn't listen to professional scientists and professional people who know what is actually going on in Europe, but they were only listening to propagandists. It's this weird thing when propaganda works that long that those who create it in the end believe in it. And they are believing their own propaganda that is only telling lies for years and years.
All right, misreading the situation. Lots to talk about on both sides when it comes to misreading the situation. First, though, question. Raphaël Borromont, excuse me for being a little bit provocative here. Does Vladimir Putin care if he's losing money?
Actually, if you look at the first steps of the embargo, it was putting an embargo on...
We're talking about 2014 after the Crimean invasion?
Yeah, and also about the idea to put an embargo on oil by December 2022, and then maybe an embargo on the gas, Russian gas. If you put an embargo without price caps, then the effect on Russian financial resource is neutral, because they're going to sell less gas but at a higher price. So I think it's very important for Europe not to follow into fake good ideas, but to think globally when they put sanctions, also to put price cap, meaning price cap on the gas. And also the other thing is that they have to anticipate. There is a lack of anticipation in European energy policy. There is a need to anticipate in terms of gas storage for this winter and the next one, and also in terms of...
And we're not doing badly on that score. We thought, the gas tanks are going to be empty. They're 90% full right now.
Yeah, but first, the storage doesn't represent many months of consumption, and also the level is not the same depending on which country in Europe you're talking about. Mm. And the other thing is that we started very late, and we are not sure to be ready for the winter after this one. And the other thing is that we need to also do common purchases of gas. especially LNG, because otherwise we'll have no impact on the price.
I want to get back to that plan, that push for common purchases. But again, I want to get back to reading Vladimir Putin. He's been in power since 2000. The hope of the West since the fall of the Soviet Union was the more you did business deals with Russia, the more rule of law and sound investment environment could be. These are images of the late CEO of Total, Christophe de Margerie, paying a call on Putin at his Novo-Ogaryovo residence outside of Moscow in 2011. Later in 2017, 3 years after de Margerie's death in a Moscow plane crash, here you see the Russian president inaugurating an oil tanker in the Frenchman's name. Hindsight is always 2020, Jean-Louis Chiansky. It seems like Nord Stream 1 and 2 were not such a great idea now that we see everything that's happened since. In the case of deals done in the past, is this the same Vladimir Putin as in 2000, or is it a different one? Did we misread Russia?
Oh, we probably misread Russia. I think...
Because Christophe de Margerie, he was admired as a canny businessman, down to earth.
Absolutely.
And
was making a lot of deals with Russia. The position of Total is
very,
very important.
What did he fail to see? The current president of Total, Patrick Pouyanné, waited as long as he could, obviously, to pull out of the deal to drill in the Arctic.
Yeah. Well, let me just go back to one thing. I think what we are misreading is sense of power, especially with gas. Oil and gas are completely different things. Oil is much more fluid. You can replace, you can go, you can buy. Gas is extremely powerful. I mean, the supply of Russian gas is extremely powerful. You can't switch from one day to the other. You know, you have a pipeline or a gas line, and you're stuck. This is one. And two, most European countries are extremely, as you know, extremely dependent, especially Germany. They do electricity, they generate electricity with Russian gas. If you don't have electricity in Germany, the whole thing collapses. And therefore, I think what was in mind of pretending reading his mind is an extreme sense of power, especially through the gas supplies, and the fact that Europe will bend and will accept what he does. Now, why he did that, I don't know, but certainly an extreme sense of power with what he had.
I get back to my question. Is it the same Vladimir Putin as the one who took power in 2000?
I don't know. Well, I think probably
for the business community, what's the view?
In his priorities have probably changed. Now, if you want me to speculate, at the time he had not the priority of invading Ukraine. Once he made his mind, probably, of going for Ukraine, I think he got the two major, and he did with two major weapons. One is nuclear, and the second is gas. And with the two weapons, he thought he could do anything he wanted and that the world would bend.
Hannah Celeste, you agree?
No, I disagree, because it seems to me that for many within the European Union, it was nice to self-deceptive or wherever, because from 2000 till 2010, we had two Russian-Ukrainian gas wars, as we call them, when the Russian Federation was switching off the gas supply in the mid of the New Year night for Ukraine. And then pressed, for example, in 2010, Ukraine to sign the ill-known Kharkiv agreements, according to which the Russian Black Sea Fleet stationed for additional 25 years in Crimea. We had this gas blackmailing almost each year. We had the gas crises in Moldova when Russia really manipulated as much as possible and pressed even the change of the decision-making in the country. I can go with more examples. And when the Nord Stream discussion started, we talked to our German partners, first of all, that do you understand that energy always is the weapon for the Russian Russian Federation. They already used it for so many times. They were sure that it can be a weapon for the so-called post-Soviet space and will never be a weapon for the European Union. As the current events demonstrates, definitely it always were the means or the instrument for the Russian influence. And the second about Mr. Putin, he didn't change. If you remember his speech in Munich in 2007, he already said that collapse of the Soviet Union is the biggest tragedy for him. When the whole world been celebrating it as the end of the totalitarian, he said that it is the tragedy. And later as well, all his statements about Ukraine for all these years, even before 2014, was that Ukraine is not a nation, Ukrainian language doesn't exist, and so on and so on. It seems to me it was just comfortable to sit somewhere in the European capital and not see what the Russian policy is against its neighbors.
But again, I'm trying to understand here, Hannah. In that case, why did we have those explosions, those mysterious explosions in the Baltic Sea, hitting Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2? If it is self-inflicted by the Russians, why do that?
There can be two reasons behind this. First is to demonstrate the capabilities to do so, because a year ago I already read several very good articles of the energy specialists and security specialists who demonstrated how the Russian fleet was active in the same territories. But at that time, many was guessing, should it be the some kind of the terroristic act over there, or should it be the terroristic act against the communication lines, because there were a lot of the activities around this.
But
so
why cut yourself off? Why cut yourself off though from your own money supply?
Because already this Nord Stream 2, it is already made decision that it will not work. So it is not a money supply for the Russian Federation. And with the Nord Stream 1, we've been coming closer and closer to the same decision that it will be the rejection to buy energy resources by this route. But also don't forget that there are two other routes, like the main volumes of supply of the Russian energy to Europe was going through Belarus and through Ukraine, so-called Druzhba pipeline. So it's not that Russia is completely cutting. They have two alternative pipelines. It's just the demonstration that over there, that is the additional opportunities to bring panic to the European markets.
And as a Ukrainian, how do you feel about the fact that that Ukrainian route is still operating?
You know, it's operating. We understand that a lot of countries depends on it. We are just a transit country. And as for now, more or less, the Russian missiles were accurate not to target the pipeline itself. They understand that they depend. Even that the Russians been shortening the supply even before February through this pipeline. But a few neighboring countries, the Eastern European countries, are dependent on this route. Moldova is dependent on this route. So there are possibilities like for it to continue. We would like not to have Russia as the neighbor, but we understand we are rational. We understand that that is impossible. And we understand what does it mean for our European partners.
There is one thing we're missing here, is the fact that gas prices has been multiplied by 3 or 4. And that the supplies of Russia to Europe hasn't gone down by 3 times or 4 times. And therefore, the total revenues of Russia were not hampered by what happened. In fact...
Not yet.
Not yet. Well, but that's very important. And therefore, you know, he presses and pushes and got the same kind of money. And at the same time, keep the resources. And therefore, do not take the resources out of the ground. So it's a kind of, it works. It works.
Alexander Filipenko, you hear Jean-Louis Shilonsky saying how that natural gas is a mighty weapon for Vladimir Putin. Does he care if he loses money?
Well, looks like his oligarchs for now have that much money that they can cover things that are being lost, and looks like there are new ways and new markets to sell. I'm not a specialist there, but it looks like that India is one of the markets, and the Asia Pacific region is one of the new markets. And so regarding the money, it's all very symbolic. And I must come back to what Hannah Shalast absolutely correctly pointed out, that he said that the collapse of the Soviet Union is the greatest geopolitical tragedy, but he didn't say that for him, it generally is the greatest geopolitical tragedy of the 20th century, and not disregarding the Second World War, Holocaust, and all that. That is the greatest geopolitical tragedy.
So you're saying that Vladimir Putin is an ideologue more than a pragmatic kind of leader?
Probably the person who is in power for 22 years or almost 23 years, because he became prime minister in 1999. So that he already has that much, and you can just look through some Navalny investigations, how much money he has, how much palaces he has, et cetera, and how much all the oligarchs, as Roman Abramovich and all others, who are considered to be people just carrying his money, how much do they have? So he doesn't really care anymore about the money, most probably. And now he went on to those somehow delusional ideas that we can come back either to a bipolar system or maybe a unipolar system, with Russia being the only pole in the international relations, if we can put it this way. So probably he's now going to ideology. Before that, it was all about the money, but now maybe it goes to ideology. Although I'm sorry, I cannot not jump back to the question of the person, that what if he changed for those 22 years. Probably any person who is in power, in absolute power, for 22 years cannot stay the same. There must be some changes, most probably. You can maybe only be the queen to stay the same. But anyways, one important point, I think, that he used to be a KGB officer, and a KGB officer as a head of the country, that's kind of difficult. And I don't think that he ever believed in democracy. He ever believed in liberalism. I don't think he ever believed in the end of history, if we remember Fukuyama. So he wants to come back to times of the Soviet Union.
Alexandra, the Russian president, we know you talk about ideology, as an ally in the Russian Orthodox Church, Patriarch Kirill, who last week heaped praise on Putin for his 70th birthday. Kirill, who in the past has justified the use of nuclear weapons. But I have to ask you this question. Are we making a mistake by focusing too much? You say he's got absolute power. By focusing too much on one man. Is it Vladimir Putin's mindset, or is it a mindset that is more widely shared across Russia?
Well, as we call it, it's the collective Putin, the collective Vladimir Putin, because of course it's not one person who's making all the decisions, but some people around him, of course. As we know, he praised himself for not using internet ever. And we know that all the news and everything, all the information he gets from certain people, he gets from those special papers that are brought to him every day. So he is very closed within his circle of trusted people. And we, at the beginning, we mentioned General Surovikin, who is now the head of this special military operation, as they call it. And he is the person, absolutely the person of the Soviet Union. So I think it's not accidental that now he is the head of this operation. And he's one of those trusted people. He's one within the circle, that collective Vladimir Putin. And unfortunately, the Russian Orthodox Church now shows, and it's been showing for quite some time, that it is also part of this collective Vladimir Putin.
So let's turn to the economics professor here for a second. Raphael Borumont, you're hearing the case against, forgive me for speaking technically, Marxist determinism, that history is made by these big blocks of humanity fighting against one another. Here it's individuals that are shaping what's going on. Individuals' will and individuals' delusions, perhaps. Is that what you're going to tell your students on Wednesday morning?
No, that's not what I'm going to say, but I understand your question. You're trying to understand which rationale is behind all these decisions. But I think that it's like a chess.
We were told money makes the world go round, right?
Yeah, but probably it's a chess game where President Putin said that Europe is divided, that Europe is short-sighted, and that the situation, the level of dependency towards gas is not the same within Europe. So he said that if he tries to destabilize European economies, he may win at any price. But what we underestimate is that there is a mutual dependence between Russia and Europe in terms of gas revenues. So Russia needs more Europe than Europe needs Russia in terms of gas. Russia will not be able to replace Europe by China in a few months because of a lack of infrastructure. But the problem is that Europe has to diversify its suppliers, notably in terms of LNG, but they don't have enough LNG infrastructure. All the countries in Europe have not the infrastructure. So it's like a bet. He knows that if the chaos has to come, it will be for everyone. And he tried to divide Europe by weakening the industry and citizen purchasing power, so that then they may vote for sometimes far-right extreme political parties that will be more pro-Russian maybe.
And so is he winning his bet?
Hopefully not, but the situation is tense and the countdown is triggered, so there is no more time to lose.
Jean-Michel Ski?
No, I think, let me take two examples. France is very lightly dependent on Russian gas, 15% of its supply. France is generating electricity with nuclear. So it's one case. The second case is Germany. Germany is 50% depending on Russian gas and generating most of its electricity because they cut off nuclear with this gas. And therefore, there is an implied weakness, or there is a structural weakness in Europe because of this example. Two major countries are completely different.
But things are changing fast, and we see how these grids are interconnected. We're seeing how...
To an extent, but France cannot supply. France is making a deal to supply gas to Germany to help them out, really, while Germany is accepting in return to supply some electricity. But that's marginal compared to the bulk of the problem. And that's the strength of Putin. The strength of the Putin is this unbalanced Europe, which they are trying to work on, but it's a fact.
But just to say something quickly, he knows that you have some industrial plants in Europe that have to stop because of the cost of electricity or gas. And he also knows that if you take the example of France, many nuclear plants are in maintenance. So this put also tension on the electricity system within Europe. So I think all of this is taken into the dimension of this very aggressive policy.
Aggressive policy, but we're seeing for the first time talk about Hannah Celeste, the pooling, and you heard Raphael mention it earlier in the conversation, the pooling of energy purchases at the EU level. You're seeing there's a meeting this week to patch up differences between, that's scheduled to patch up differences between the leaders of France, Spain, and Portugal over pipelines, more interconnectedness, by the way, which extends all the way to Ukraine, what with Ukraine being hooked up to the electricity grid of Europe. Things, are they moving at a speed you didn't expect? Hannah Celeste?
There are a few things that let's return back to the yesterday attacks against Ukraine. What was just correctly said, that Ukraine just 2 days before the February attacks joined or connected together with Moldova to the European grid. And it was done as a test. Originally, we were going to connect only by the end of this year. And it was good that time was not lost. We connected and never disconnected. And yesterday attacks against the electrical stations, against electrical grid, also led to the situation that Ukraine stopped exporting electricity to Europe. And we've been exporting quite a significant numbers and had even more potential due to the hydroelectrical stations and other capacities that we had. So we need to understand that such attacks of the Russian Federation against Ukrainian energy infrastructure will also have effect to the European countries. So as for now, it's not that easy. We are trying now, for example, for Lviv to connect with Poland, so to import from them. That is good and bad things in this, considering the military actions. But also just very, very small comment about what you said about collective Putin, or is it Putin a lot? As we see the 7 months from the Russian social networks, from how they commented yesterday events, it is not anymore just Mr. Putin. It is not anymore just the narrow circle around him. He definitely created a society that is largely support the current activities. And that is a problem, because in this case, they will not care that much in case some money losses will come. Definitely, it's always the question of competition between the fridge and TV. War is good on TV, but not so good when you have problems with your fridge. But still, we're in the situation when Russian TV is winning. And that means that President Putin, that entourage around him, will continue the current policy, not being rational in terms of money, but more emotional, more, let's say, sentimental, and because of this, more cruel.
Alexandra Filipenko, the information war is far from won. You agree?
Oh, absolutely. Russian propaganda is as strong as ever, I must say. And all entertainment programs on the main TV channels were changed for information programs, but rather we should say disinformation programs. The propaganda is working very, very hard. And we should also, we tend to forget about Mr. Prigozhin, who is now known as the person who is mobilizing people from prisons to fight in Ukraine. But before that, Mr. Prigozhin was known and widely known in the United States as a person who had those fabrics of trolls, of online trolls, and he was very successful in that. And he was very successful again in also trying to somehow meddle with the American elections and doing that. That's the whole other issue. So they were very successful in let's say putting this Russian social networks only in this way of supporting the war. And everyone online seems to be supporting the war, but if you go a little deeper, apparently most of them are trolls. But the propaganda, that's part of the propaganda.
And we had this Tuesday, Alexandra, on that point, Russia branding Meta, the parent company of Facebook and Instagram, a terror organization. Are we headed towards a world where the Russians will be isolated from the rest of the world? Can you put globalization back in a box?
Well, that's what President Putin has been trying to do. As I've said, he doesn't use the internet, so he probably believes that no one really needs to use it, and everyone must only watch TV and see what he wants them to see on TV. But for now, Russians are still trying to get some information, but at least those who are opposing the war, who are against the war. And Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, everything was banned in Russia from February 24th. You cannot post or use Facebook. You can only use it through VPN. You can only see news, independent news, through VPN. For now, YouTube is not blocked, but that's for now. And I surely believe that they think they can put globalization back and they can come back to the Soviet Union. We've been talking about Soviet Union, it seems, many times during the program. But this is, I think they believe in it, but I hope that they cannot actually do it. They don't have the means to do it, hopefully.
Speaking Monday at a tech conference in Estonia, the president of the European Commission taking stock again of this moment in time with this new escalation out of Ukraine and adopting, well, a martial tone when she evoked her vision of the future.
Critical infrastructure is the new frontier of warfare, and Europe will be prepared.
Raphaël Borromont, the use of the word warfare. Are we in a wartime economy? Is this warfare?
Not only it's an economic war, but also it's really the hour of truth for the awakening of a political Europe, at least in terms of energy and
because there's going to be more escalations before this is all over. We're all braced for it.
It seems that the escalation is on the way, so it's really the hour of truth for the awakening of political Europe. I mean, we've been saying that for many years, but now it's an emergency.
Jean-Louis Chilansky?
I just would like to go back to what you said before. It seems that what happened with the bombs going through Ukraine is changing the face of what we are seeing. What President Macron said was kind of puzzling in a way. He was saying it's a new phase, it's something different, and therefore it may very well be that it is a turning point now from economic and that kind of stuff to a kind of war stand.
And when you see the Germans sending that first air defense system to Ukraine?
Exactly. That's kind of, it's escalation, but it has been escalated for a long time. But it seems to me it's more than escalation. It's a different way of looking at this situation. Whether it's war on the field, I don't think so. I don't know, but I don't think so. But certainly a different way of looking at what's happening.
And do the French have the resolve?
Sorry?
Do the French have the resolve for this?
Time will tell. I'm not sure about that, or whether Europe has the resolve. No one knows, but at least in words.
All right. Cautious Jean-Louis Chilansky, thank you so much. I want to thank as well Raphaël Borumont.
Thank you.
Hannah Celeste for being with us from Brussels. Alexandra Filipenko from Vilnius. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 today.